Hello, hello. Welcome, welcome.
There we go. We've got people coming in. Oh, that's fantastic. I see a few familiar names tonight. Hi, everyone. I've just got my big boys sleepwalking, so I'll just put him back to bed. If you'll excuse me a minute. Where are you, Zika?
We'll just wait as everybody comes in. There's quite a few booked in for tonight, so we'll just hang out.
There he is. That's what we tend to do, Deb.
Just hang out.
Bit of a chat. It's great because depending on the topic, people are more or less relaxed, and so sometimes you see them curled up on the couch with a glass of wine or eating the last of their takeaway. Sometimes you see them snuggled up in bed if it's a really good topic. I don't know that tonight's topic is really
snuggle up in bed type of topic.
Oh, well, it might be for you. Oh, that's great. We've got lots coming in now. And we've got a few coming on Facebook Live as well.
I'll be so lucky to see two of my favourite women.
Hi, Lyndall. How are you going?
On screen.
Oh, that's great. Hey, Labosh, you're watching from Melbourne. Hope things are going well in there.
There's quite a few on Facebook, is there? Looks like it.
Oh, that's great. See, sometimes we do different topics, and we always get a bit of a different crowd depending on what the topic is. So one night we had a Zoom about children and parenting in the village, raising kids in community, and one night we talked about how to grow mushrooms with our mushroom expert. And it's always Lincoln was fantastic. He really knows his stuff. Oh, fantastic! A bit closer to home at Budgeroy. Hi, Julie on Facebook. But yes, I definitely think this was a timely topic.
I certainly think so. There seems to be a lot of momentum and a lot of interest coming through around the alternatives to the stock standard of bank finance.
Yeah, it's certainly giving people time to reflect on how things are done and time to reflect on whether we can do things better in a lot of areas of life. Let's see, it's 8 o'clock, so we might make a start. Actually, before a little story before we do start, I'm joined tonight by Deb, who's our financial controller here at Narara Ecovillage. And I actually wanted Deb to talk about nothing to do with financials. I approached her with a pitch. I said, Deb, people really want to know how to bulk buy oats. Can you come and talk about bulk buying oats? Because Deb's involved with our food co-op and our buying groups. And you looked at me and you're like, look, I can talk about oats, but people really want to hear about how to afford housing and how to afford alternative methods of home ownership. I said, Deb, that's really boring. I'm sorry, nobody's going to be interested. Like food security, it's all about food security. Anyway.
And here we all are.
I know.
Nobody's interested.
Thanks, Deb.
If you'd like, I can talk about the oats as well.
Maybe another time. But Deb, do you want to start by introducing yourself?
Yeah, sure. Deborah Moore. I've been an accountant for over 20 years, which is a really long time. But it's nerdily, it's something that I am very interested in. It's my passion, and more so using that skill in an area like for a not-for-profit, like for an eco-village, is really what I just love doing, and I love that I can do that as my work, and it's also, a source of income for me. Yeah,
great. And so here at the Eco-Village, have you done anything in terms of alternative accounting before this?
Creative accounting?
Creative accounting. Is that legal?
So one of my kind of most exciting projects that I did work on outside of the village was on a social benefit bond for a program, a really, really great program called New Pin that helps bring or keep families together where there's a risk of the child being removed from the family. But that was a really great example of where you can use accounting skills in something quite creative and quite, I guess, innovative. Yeah, so that was a great joy about 8 years ago now.
Yeah, great. I should preface tonight's conversation by saying I'm learning as much as you all are tonight. And Deb, before we start, before we kind of zoom in to the individual property ownership discussion, can you talk a little bit about Narara Ecovillage and how the whole Ecovillage is quite unique in terms of its financing?
Yeah, certainly. It is quite a unique story, and I wasn't actually here from the beginning, so it's a story that I've learnt from when I joined the Ecovillage. But it is an interesting and unique story. Essentially, we had our eyes set on this $5 million property, and essentially crowdfunded the program, the purchase of that property, and we did so without needing any bank finance, which is quite impressive. We then continued on bringing in members over the years and had enough finance to then engage civils contractors, which means the people who basically create the roads, etc. And that was a significant contract. And again, we did that without any bank finance. So if you think about a normal developer, say Stockland or anyone else, there's always this bank finance in the background. It costs easily 10% plus, depending on the interest rates at the time. And then of course there's loads of profits on top. And so it's quite a really loaded, I would say, development project. Whereas Narara Ecovillage has managed to keep it quite kind of lean, if you like, because we've just kept member finance. It's been completely member funded, and the connection between those who really want to see this succeed and those who are lending to us, it's one and the same people. So it's a really great kind of setup really for us. Yeah.
And so stemming from that, a lot of the people that are interested in our Ecovillage are also open to hearing alternative ways of financing their own dream. And I guess one of the first things that people think about is they look at the lots that we have, and they consider the lot prices and consider what it might cost to build your typical home. And sometimes that feels a bit out of reach for some people.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we are restricted in our current location in that, affordability is often about, downsizing it literally in the space that you require. And we can't build a block of flats at this moment in time. So that would be an option of creating affordability. So what we've needed to do is become quite creative. We are allowed to divide our land at the moment into 550 square metre lots. They're relatively large if you're thinking small footprint or affordability. But there's some great and creative solutions that are coming out already in stage 1, and there's so many more that we're looking at for stage 2. So shall I jump into some of those examples already?
Yeah.
There's actually one that's highlighted on our website, and it's called Small Plus Tiny Equals Affordable. And it's a great partnership between two women who had their dreams. One is always dreamed of living in a tiny house, and the other in a small, a modest sized house. And the affordability came from actually deciding to acquire the land or share the cost of the land between the two of them, and they could each have their dwelling. And of course, a tiny house on wheels is considered like a caravan in our council area. You can live in a caravan as long as there's also a house on the same land. So that works perfectly for them both. So that was a great example of how we have affordability and creativity has allowed both of these members to live without bank finance.
And it's interesting too, looking at that lot, because although it's kind of a standard suburban house lot, they don't feel like they're on top of one another at all. And I think it's because they've made that decision from the start. It's not like they've had a house and they've decided to bring in a caravan or whatever into the backyard, but it's been designed and landscaped in such a way that both houses have privacy, but yet they have this beautiful shared outdoor space. And they both love their gardening, so that's a shared project too.
That's right. And I think that is one of the things we see a lot, where you see either a granny flat or a tiny house or a caravan jammed in as an afterthought, and it literally is like that. It doesn't feel like a dwelling with a nice outdoor kind of the space to it and the sun streaming in. It feels quite literally jammed in. So that's it's a great design, I think.
And we should point out that with that one, at the risk of getting way too specific, the tiny house actually deals with its toilet waste through a on-site system. The sewage is kind of used in the garden. And so if I was in my Sydney house where we used to live before we moved to the Ecovillage, and I put a tiny house in my backyard, and the person said to me, I'd really like to dump my sewage in the backyard, no way. But because that's been set up from the start, it's actually very, very inoffensive.
That's right. And there's actually quite a few of us who are looking at having composting toilets in their homes. So I think it's a bit of a different norm here in the village. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I think all too often, particularly in the larger cities, you see apartment blocks that are really poorly designed, or townhouse blocks, or even you know, strata developments that really very little thought has been given to the individual's privacy. And I think if the individual owner can have some say over that, you know, it makes it a lot of a better
Absolutely.
outcome.
And it's not just the individual privacy. We see it time and time again. And actually there's just a great but terrible example not far from us up on the Central Coast, where the houses have been jammed in like sardines. So there's also no airflow and there's no natural sunlight. And, you know, a lot of people who might have been looking at healthy homes would know that they're both really important, the airflow and sunlight into your home, particularly in the winter months. Yeah.
So here at the Ecovillage, going smaller doesn't necessarily mean accepting poor design.
That's right. Not at all.
Yeah.
We've got some great examples of some small homes that have met the standards, and actually Jazz's home is an extraordinary case of that. Was it 9 stars?
Yeah.
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 Quite extraordinary.
One of the things that we encourage all members who are building at Narara Ecovillage to do is to consider how small they can build their home. We know that a small footprint house uses less resources, so it's more friendly for the environment. It's also more friendly for your pocket, and it encourages people to use our community facilities a lot more. So can you talk a bit about the community facilities that people might be able to leave out of their home?
Yeah, although there's one more advantage that you forgot, and that is the cleaning. You know, who wants a mansion to clean if you can have a small space? So the facilities are huge. And if we start with the land, there's some avid gardeners in our midst at the Ecovillage who have opted for a small plot of land that they own themselves, because we have so much shared space. There's no need to say, well, I actually really need a big garden because I'm going to grow all these different citrus trees and this, da, 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 da. You have it at your doorstep in the shared spaces. And then within the building as well, what we've got planned within the Ecovillage is a couple of what we call a common house. And if anybody's looked into co-housing or done any reading around that, they will probably understand what I mean. But essentially, it's essentially a residential home that is used by the people in the community for whatever they decide that they actually want to use it for. And what we were thinking we would use it for is gatherings. So you don't need to have a massive dining table or, you know, 16-piece dining set. For those larger gatherings, you can actually use the common house. Equally, there might be a music room that might be shared, because for everyone to set up a music room in their own home, which might not get used very frequently, it would, you know, seem a little wasteful, if you like. And the other one is spare rooms. So there's a lot of spare rooms out there which are not used for, I don't know, potentially 11 months of the year. And so if we can share that need for a spare room around in their village, then there's a lot more, I guess, usage, and therefore you're getting a lot more benefit from the buildings, and therefore the resources we put into the buildings.
Yeah, and so I can talk a bit about the stage 1 common house design here. It's actually designed to have a freestanding 1-bedroom granny flat, which can either be rented out for short-term use, or we're exploring the idea of putting a long-term tenant in there who can act as a kind of caretaker for the common house. But it also has 2 or 3 bedrooms as well, which I imagine will end up almost time sharing. So when my in-laws come to stay, they don't have to stay here, and we don't actually have a spare room for them to stay in. They can stay next door at the common house. And see, even doing that, I remember when we were building our house here, we calculated the cost savings, and it was about $20,000 cost saving just by not putting on that spare room.
That's right. And also one of the other benefits is we're looking at, you know, shared laundry facilities. So, you know, if you do have just a small washer, then there might be a larger one where you can use for the larger, you know, bedding, for example. Yeah, there's plenty of other examples of where we can share, even things like motor mowers. Do we all need a motor mower? So yeah, it's a great benefit of how you can actually downsize your house, your storage, and all of your needs. Yeah.
And sometimes it's a bit intimidating if you have a, dare I say, a regular sized suburban house that you're in, to imagine how you could possibly fit all your stuff smaller. But I've quickly learnt that you actually don't need all the stuff that you need when you're living on your own in suburbia. I mean, just today I've met with 2 of my neighbours to borrow like ramekins. I hardly ever use ramekins, but I wanted to make creme brulee today. And then another girl brought me down her spare clothes for her kids. You know, she didn't have room to store them at hers, and would I like to look through them and whatever. And, you know, there's so many great interactions. I'm borrowing someone's Thermomix. I had a second-hand one, but it just wasn't worth the bench space. I mean, it's what, 60 centimetres wide, and that's, you know, I could save money on my bench space just by not having your Thermomix out all the time.
That's it.
And it seems ridiculous, but these things add up. And when you really think about how much you can lean into your community,
yeah,
and how much you can actually share and reciprocate without feeling guilty about it, it's extraordinary the savings you can make.
That's it. Yeah. And so I think, you know, there's a lot of people out there looking at, you know, tiny houses are a great example. They've taken off over the last 12 months. Downsizing. And it's not, you know, small footprint isn't necessarily just because of affordability or I can't afford it. It's also a lifestyle choice. Coming back to my example of the cleaning, I would love to have a small footprint.
With your children?
Not sure about that. Maybe they can each have their tiny house and they can look after their own. But, you know, there's a lot of truth in the more space you have, the more things you fill with it, and then the more cleaning up as well. But tiny's not the only alternative. There's a lot of alternatives, and if we look further afield, it's really interesting to see how unique the Australian, you know, 3 kids family and a picket fence around your house and, you know, bank finance on top is not the norm elsewhere. And so thinking about that, it just opens up a realm of possibilities. And I would love for, you know, I guess this is where I get quite excited as I get a bit of a geeky nerd, and I'd love for us to be showcasing that there are alternatives out there and to bring that into the village as well. So, yeah.
And so one of those alternatives, as we mentioned, is basically sharing a lot with someone else and each deciding on putting 2 separate dwellings, if you will. And
That's right.
our planning laws allow for a house and a granny flat or a house and a tiny house. But what about if you're a couple of people and you really only need a granny flat each or something like that?
Yeah, so even the minimum size of the housing in New South Wales, there's all sorts of regulations, but there are some people who have chosen to build a modest size house but separate it into a couple of wings. So it's sort of like what you're giving an example of. It's similar sizing as 2 granny flats, but there might be a shared, I don't know, maybe deck in between, or, you know, barbecue area, etc. And you mentioned there's the small house. It's not necessarily a granny flat. You could have also a granny flat, and you could have a tiny all-in-one 550 square metre lot quite easily. Again, it comes back down to, you know, working a way to share that space with others, and that might be the joint tenancy that you, or the tenancy in common, I should say, that you referred to, where 2 separate parties own a lot. It might even be somebody has the money to be able to say, well, I could buy the whole lot and I could build my small house, but I would love to accommodate a granny flat that I could rent out, or even put a car space there and make sure it's, you know, got its surrounds so that someone could rent that little piece of land from me with a tiny house. And so, yeah, create a little bit more of that village and small footprint, even though we're still bound by the 550 square metres.
And I think that there are going to be people listening who are at different places on the spectrum of the sharing spectrum, shall I say.
That's right.
There'll be some that are really being forced to look at affordability because financially they just can't make it work to buy a full lot and build a full house. There's going to be some people that are very comfortable with the idea of co-housing and sharing a house with other people. In fact, one of our members here was toying with the idea of building a big house with 4 single bedrooms, each with their own ensuite, but then sharing the kitchen and lounge room facilities. And then there's people who are going to be sitting in the middle, where they're comfortable sharing some things, but actually they don't want someone in their kitchen all the time.
That's right. And I don't think there's, you know, a one size fits all here. It's about the diversity, the options, and finding what, you know, which one suits you or your lifestyle the best. Yeah. And I love exploring these alternatives around keeping people's privacy, that space that you feel like, yep, this is mine, and yet allowing, especially for people who are living by themselves, allowing some space that is then shared. And so when you want the social, and it can be quite lonely when you live on your own, you know, when you're used to having a family and kids around you, you relish being home alone. But when you're home alone a lot and you're the only one in your home, you know, there's sometimes when you really just would love that company. And so having those common spaces and yet private wings, that's something that I think would work really, really well. Yeah.
And it's interesting too, even just the book Retro Suburbia talks a lot about behavioural adaptations, and bearing that in mind, living here at the Eco-Village, our families had to become very clear about what we share and how we share, particularly because my kids always seem to be inviting other kids and sharing stuff that, like the Matic and the axe, that I don't want them to share. They're not allowed to share those, incidentally. But you get very good at knowing your boundaries and your limitations, and very good about saying, I'm happy to share this with anyone, or I'm actually only happy to share this with my friends who I know are going to respect my axe, or actually I don't want to share this at all, it's really special to me, or you know, for whatever reason. And I don't know, one of the ladies here always says clear is kind, and I think that's the thing I'm going with at the moment, with the sharing thing.
Yeah, even if it's no. And, you know, making the request doesn't necessarily mean you have to expect a yes back again. And I think the other one is, of course, you know, I might be willing and happy to share today, but ask me again if you want it again tomorrow, because I don't know if I'm still willing and happy to say yes again tomorrow. So, you know, to keep that dialogue open.
And it's that sort of thing that actually brings closeness between people too, I think. Like one of our neighbours, they've got young kids, and they found that they just weren't seeing their kids at all on weekends because they'd be off playing with the pack of kids. And so they said, well, actually, we'd like to do a family Sunday. So on Sundays, can you please not let your kids come down near our house, because we don't have any fences here at the Eco-Village. And if our kid is out, you know, for some reason, can you just remind him that it's family Sunday for him? And, you know, that's a boundary, and it felt very clear and comfortable for her to say that.
Yeah.
And it's
absolutely.
meant that they can still live very close to us geographically, and still have that privacy that they need.
Yeah. And I think that's really important. You know, it is quite a transition from suburbia, the typical, you know, fences, and so you feel like there's a physical boundary, at least for the kids, whereas here it's almost free roaming. But it is really important to set those boundaries, even if they're invisible.
And so we've talked a little bit about ways that you can physically build and live here at Narara for less than the cost of an average lot and an average house. But it gets a bit messy sometimes from a legal point of view when you're sharing. And I mean, I know this, you know, about the village trailer. The village trailer was happily loaned to a few of us, and then it got busted during a working bee. And it's like, well, whose responsibility was it to fix it and to pay for it? And who was going to tell the owners? And we had to work through all of that. But imagine if you know, if you're trying to negotiate problems with your house, with your neighbour that's living in your backyard. How can you get some kind of protection in those situations? Yeah,
so that's a really interesting one. There are options. So one of the examples, as we said, the tenancy in common, a legal a document was drawn up so that the two parties fully understand where they stand, you know, what their position is, what things they share, what costs they share, etc., etc. So as soon as you go beyond, can I pause you there? Yeah, sure. Because I tell you, I'm very new to this. So they literally went to a solicitor together and said, we want to split a lot and each pay half of the lot or whatever. And they divvied up who was going to pay the rates. Like they actually wrote all that down. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So it's just, you know, it's completely clear and transparent, and there's no queries later on. If I guess what you need to think about is when you're looking at these legal things, that at some point it could get messy. And so the clearer you make it up front while everything's happy, the better, because there will be some messy times. So it's any relationship will have those challenging times. So the clearer you set everything out, the better it is. So it's almost like a prenuptial. A little bit like that. I don't know what that is. But as soon as you go from two people to more than two people, it gets a little bit more complicated. So that's where I think we need to start looking at alternatives. And I guess there is one that's fairly common in Australia, and that is strata. And so that's a possibility, but there are some council limits or expectations around the lot size for strata. Another option is actually company title. It doesn't have the best name for itself in Australia, again, well, mostly in this case, because banks don't tend to like to borrow to people who have a company title over their land.
Can you explain what that
company title? Yeah, sure. Essentially, it means that the land and its buildings is owned by a company.
Okay.
And so let's say you and I live in this building and it's got 2 levels on it, and so we each have our distinct area that we live in. Instead of it being subdivided through a strata plan, it's been the whole building is owned by a company, and I might own 50 shares and you might own 50 shares in the company. And so that's our investment in the property, is through shares in the company that owns it.
So did we just make up a company?
Yes.
We just made up a company. Is that legal?
Not what we just did now in the conversation, no, but
okay.
It is totally legal. It is an option that you can, you can pursue. It doesn't, the title of the land doesn't need to be in a real person's name. It can be in the name of a company.
And how is that different then to the joint tenancy thing you were talking about?
So joint tenancy, if we were going into to purchase a lot together, the title of the lot would have our names on it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it would say the portion as well that is held. So it's actually tenancy in common is the one that's normally used for people who are not in a relationship together.
Mm.
And so it might be that, you have 50% and I have 50% share, and that would be named on the title, but our names would be on the title. The challenge with that is if I wanted to sell my portion of it, then it needs to be agreed with both of us as to who will come in and buy and essentially replace me on the title of the lot. Not that it's not possible, it's actually just happened very recently in the Ecovillage.
Mm.
Whereas company title, I would have the capacity to say, well, I've got 50 shares. I've decided to move because I'm going to have a big family and this place no longer suits me. I'm going to sell my shares to Joe Bloggs. And so Joe Bloggs will move in and take over my shares.
So you don't actually have to reissue a title document?
That's right.
Well, there's got to be a cost saving there.
Absolutely, yeah.
Uh-huh.
And so there's pros and cons for each of these. There's another one though that is really interesting, and it's many people on this call, I think, are have a bit of a background in co-housing and may well have done this research, but it's called the Lilac model. So in Leeds, there's I think it was around 2013 they got this group of 20 houses up, and they also have a common house between them, and the housing ranges from 1-bedroom units through to a 4-bedroom family home. So there's diversity of housing, and it's essentially a mutual home ownership society, which is like a cooperative. It's the English version of, essentially it's a cooperative, so it's like company title, but instead of a company owning it, it's a cooperative that owns it, but it's really similar. You still buy shares or equity in the cooperative when you want to invest and actually buy into this group that owns the buildings, the land and the buildings.
Is that like what we've done here at the Ecovillage?
No.
Oh.
Sorry. Let's get even more no, it's not that complicated. What we've got is community title. It's really similar to freehold. So freehold is the regular type of land ownership in New South Wales, except that there's added rules. So the difference between freehold and community title is that community title comes with what's called a community management statement, and that is essentially some bylaws, some rules around what you can and can't do.
And that's what sets the culture of the place in a way.
That's right, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of what protects it as well. So it sets the culture, but it also protects it. So in 20 years' time, we still know what sort of person would be attracted to live here.
And we sort of know what kind of lives we want to be living.
That's right. And not that it's all set in stone, it can be changed. So the people over time, if things change, if they think, oh, this was written 20 years ago, it's no longer relevant, they can change it, but they need to change it with agreement from everybody. So, well, not absolutely everybody, but by majority.
And so with the, what was the other title? The Lilac?
freehold title?
No, the Lilac model.
Oh, the Lilac model, yeah. So
with
that's really interesting and innovative.
Do they not have rules?
They do have rules. So what's unique about them is not so much around the type of land ownership it is, it's how they pull together their money. And it's great because Lilac actually stands for low impact. I'm going to forget it now. Living, affordable community. And so it's not just about, low impact being, they're quite, ecologically sound, environmentally sound buildings. Affordability means that they're basically, there's so much information, by the way, I should just say, go to lilac.coop, so C-O-O-P. There is just tons of information out there. And they're really great. Go to the resources page and there's all sorts, there's presentations, there's all the documentation. But essentially it's really just allows people who are at any scale, so from somebody who's on a very low income up to somebody who's, got a fairly decent income, to invest what they can and contribute what they can. And it allows that sort of flexibility and change with lifestyles as well. So what they've seen is that somebody might come in with the need for a 1-bedroom unit, and over time partner up with somebody, have some kids and go, we're going to need a bit more space now. And so they don't necessarily need to leave the complex, that they could actually say, well, actually, I'd like to invest some more and I'd like to move from this place to a larger unit if one would become available. So that's happened over time as well. So it's a really, it's quite a complicated financial model that they've used, but it's really interesting.
So that means they don't have to go through the rigmarole of selling their 1-bedroom unit and then buying, losing the 50,000 stamp duty money to get a bigger place. But it does also mean, I guess, that are they permanently renting that 1-bedroom thing? So
that is the interesting thing. It's sort of like being a renter, but also with equity and ownership. So it's the interesting thing with renting, particularly in the Australian market, it's a little bit different overseas, where long-term rents are quite common. My brother-in-law actually recently rented a place and fitted out the whole kitchen himself because that's the way he wanted the kitchen to be. But in Germany, that's not so uncommon. But here in Australia, the rights of the tenants are quite limited, and you always have this insecurity, like owning your own property comes with security of tenure that you can't get through renting in the Australian market, I find. And so even though technically they're renting that space, they've got the security because they're also an owner through the cooperative, because they have shares or equity in that cooperative.
Deb, I've got a couple of questions coming in about this. It seems like the Lilac thing is interesting to some of our listeners. People are wondering, is the Lilac model possible in New South Wales? So not the Lilac, well, that's a really good question. I don't think the pure Lilac model is what's going to, I'm just going to talk to nobody. I'll talk to you guys. I don't think the pure Lilac model in exact form will work perfectly from converting it from it's an English thing, straight from England into Australia. But that's not to say that it can't be adapted. And actually, there's another idea around community land trusts as well. Again, something that's done a lot overseas and has been, has been, brought to Australia and is being kind of adapted for the Australian regulations, I suppose, because it does look a little bit different. So the short answer is, yes, we can do Lilac in Australia, but it's not going to look exactly like Lilac. Yeah. And would it be, if you wanted to do a Lilac thing with a few other people on your lot or on a couple of lots, would you need some kind of investor to stump up the money first? So that is where it's going to get interesting, is what sort of finance do you need? If you need typical bank finance, particularly in the current environment, banks are a little bit more cautious than they might have been previously. That will probably be a challenge. I'm not saying it won't be possible, but that would be probably the biggest challenge, is to say, actually, here's a cooperative, we want to buy this land and we want a bank to help finance us to purchase this land. Again, it's not that it can't happen, it's just going to be a little bit unusual, and the banks are going to go,
let's see about this one. The way that it works, I think really well, is where we can couple those who want to invest in their own property, don't necessarily have enough money, with those who would like to invest in property. So, you know, classic Australian thing is to buy a rental property, and that's a way of securing some investment for the future, a little bit like an alternative to superannuation or pension, and you buy into a unit in Brisbane or a house in Sydney, and you use it and you get the rental income. So pairing those who have money that they would like to invest in property with those who would love to buy into a property collaboratively and bringing that financing together, then they can do it without a bank.
And that's exciting, in this day and time. I've got Labosh is saying his understanding is that we don't need the Lilac model at the Ecovillage if the council approves the co-housing as part of stage 2. Do you want to quickly explain what that's about?
So what we're seeking is a rezoning or a planning approval, and it's looking at allowing us to have smaller lots. So the 550 square metre lot size is the standard in our area of the Central Coast. There are smaller elsewhere, so we would love for the Central Coast Council to say, yep, okay, we can apply that norm that might be somewhere else in the Central Coast to our little parcel of land. At the moment, they haven't given us that right. If they do come along and say, yep, you can subdivide, you can basically reduce the lot sizes into smaller parcels, that would help a lot, but it doesn't actually resolve the complete picture for everybody. I think there's plenty of people who would quite easily and happily say have 4 small households on one lot for really great affordability. And that's still not going to happen with the planning proposal. In the land for stage 2, as far as I'm aware, I know we do actually have somebody on the line who might know a little bit more about that, but from what I understand, that is something that we're seeking, and it might be available in a separate part of the Narara Ecovillage, but from what I understand, it's not on the stage 2 land, the land that we're about to sell.
And that's the tricky thing, is that any kind of change with regards to planning laws comes through quite slowly.
It does.
And I know that we've got a number of people on the wait list for stage 2 who are itching to get started. And a lot of them are people who are interested in collaborating about how to live with a smaller footprint.
That's right. There's some of them have been around from the beginning, but they didn't want to jump in for stage 1 because they're actually waiting for something a little bit different. Yeah.
And can you talk a little bit about some of the options that that you might have heard on the grapevine about what some of those people are looking for, to see if there's any potential matchups tonight?
We're going to do some matchmaking tonight. Look, there's some people who are coming through and they're currently in a share house by choice. And so there's people who would love to continue that lifestyle of being in quite a social environment where they don't just have their own little, 4 walls, and it's, as I said, it can be quite lonely, and they would like to share. There are some who come with, just pluck a number out of the air, but, say $200,000, it's a fair investment, but it's not really enough. It's not really enough for half a lot, let alone the building on top of that as well. There's some who are completely able and capable of affording everything, but actually don't want all that space and would love to earn a little bit of money on the side. And so to create a place that then allows someone else to live there and a little bit of rental income is something they're looking for. We have definitely some interest from those who would love to bring a tiny house to Narara Ecovillage. As we mentioned before, that's only a possibility legally if they park on a lot where there's already a house. So you can't just, park up a big caravan park full of tiny homes. We need to actually do that a little bit more thoughtfully. There are definitely some people who, would love to collaborate, say, single parents. I mean, I think we had a chat earlier about how, if there's a couple of single parents joining in a household, then you can share the load. It's pretty hard as a single parent to do everything with the kids, but, join a couple of them and it's a little bit more, just a little bit more support.
Yeah, and that's something, even though I'm not a single parent, it's something that I've pursued with one of our neighbours, is doing weekly dinners here. So one of us gets a night off from cooking, and the trade-off is whoever doesn't cook does the washing up. And the kids actually eat better because they're with other kids who are distracting them. And my washing up gets done, and it's a bit of company on the nights that my hubby might be working late. And it's those kind of things that can really make life more, I don't know, more wonderful.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Let's see, we've talked a little bit about home ownership, and we've talked about people that might not have enough money to even get started on owning a lot and building. But you also mentioned renters, and I know that we've got a list of people who are interested in renting at Narara Ecovillage, and at present there's not a lot of options for them. Are you able to talk a bit about what rental opportunities there might be for stage 2?
Yeah, so at the moment, exactly as you said, there's not a lot of options. That's largely because the houses are still being built. So as we see more and more houses come on board, and some of the people building houses have built a little bit of extra space, perhaps a spare room out to one end of the house, or a granny flat, or even creating a bit of space where they can say, yep, bring a tiny house, not a problem. So those opportunities are emerging in stage 1 as the houses are being built. And for stage 2, I think it's going to be pretty much the same until the houses appear on stage 2. There will be quite a limit to the number of rental properties available, but we certainly encourage, you know, that as one way of ensuring that we're fulfilling our aim of diversity. Really is what it's all about, because to have a diverse community, you can't expect everybody to own their own 550 square metre lot, because that really does limit what the community will look like. It's not going to be as diverse as if you offer rental opportunities, particularly for, you know, the 20-year-olds. I don't know that many young 20-year-olds who actually own property. So if we want to have true intergenerational and diversity in our community, then we need to have all those options available.
Deb, I've got a couple of questions here about bank lending. Ruth's asking, she said that she's contacted a bank and asked for, ask information about getting a loan for a community title, and is finding that tricky. And she's wondering whether company title would actually be easier to borrow for. Yeah,
probably not. Actually, I would say, because it would be company title on community title land. I know that's going to complicate things and confuse people. So community title, even though it's becoming more and more popular, it's really just very, very similar to strata. And I don't know, you just have to drive through Sydney and you can see how many unit blocks there are, and that'd be all strata title. It's really the same as strata, only it's flat. It's becoming more and more popular. There are plenty of stock standard subdivisions that are community title, and yet it's taking the banks a little bit of time to get used to it. So the big 4 banks definitely lend to community title. All of the smaller banks and the nicer banks, a lot of them have a challenge with it, because it's just not one of their boxes that has been ticked by the head office. The only nice bank that I know of that does lend on community title is Bendigo Bank.
And are there any other models or ways that you can get around that issue, or is it always going to come back to it's on community land? Yeah, I mean,
I'd love to think that we could advocate for a change, but I just don't know that the banks are going to do that in the current environment and just for a small group of eco-villages. But it's essentially, we are definitely limited to those banks that have that box ticked, and as I said, the big 4 do.
And so say you have enough money for membership, and you might have enough for a bit of a deposit on your land, and you can't get a loan through Bendigo Bank for whatever reason, either because you're not currently working or you don't work enough. What are your options for getting a bit more cash? Is there any other more creative way that you can get a loan?
Yeah, that's a tricky one. I think for people within the eco-village, it's been quite an interesting, it's just different. I don't even know how to explain it, but we've had examples. It's like having a really large family and a network of people who are looking out for you. So we've had examples, quite a few now, of where people have been limited. They've really, whether it's because of their age that they can't get bank finance, or because of, as you said, their working history, because they've chosen a lifestyle that doesn't look like, you know, the 9-to-5 work job that people would rely on, that the bank really wants to see. So they're limited. And within the Narara Ecovillage community, there are solutions that are available simply through conversation and asking around. And it's almost like people go, oh, what about this? Or we could do this, or, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So I make no promises, but I feel ever since joining the Ecovillage that there are just so many more potential opportunities to do something different.
And it's almost like in that Indiana Jones movie, you know, the one where he's like searching for the Holy Grail. He comes to the third challenge, and I don't know if you're Indiana Jones fans, and he goes to step off into the chasm and there's nothing there, and he has to just trust and step, and then he finds there's a ledge that's obscured by dust or something. It's kind of like that. But once you, that was a long story, but once you once you join the Ecovillage, and once you start making those connections and growing close to like-minded individuals, there are a lot of side conversations and people saying, oh, well, I could probably manage, you know, this much at this sort of rate of interest. And there are opportunities that you don't get unless you grow close to people, I guess.
That's right.
And unless you care for them.
And something else that just dawned on me when you were speaking is, actually, I don't know how many people have seen or heard about BrickX. It's actually an organisation that helps people bring together small amounts of money. So if I want to invest in property, but I don't have $500,000, I've only got $50,000 or $100,000, then I can invest in part of an investment property. So that was another idea. That's like, what if we could do that in Narara Ecovillage? So that would help somebody who can't get bank finance, but they could tap into the finance that might be available within a Narara version of BrickX.
BrickX or BrickEts? Like the
X.
things. Okay. Not the things you put in a fire. No. Sorry, Deb. I like that idea a lot because often, you know, investors do have bits of money that might not be enough for a full property.
That's right. And it's also sharing the risk. So it's not one person saying, okay, sure, I'll fork it all out for this one person, you know, who wants to buy in to property. So it's the shared risk.
I've got someone here, Deb, on Facebook talking about their experience at Tasman Ecovillage, and using a community member was able to use their self-managed super fund basically to provide their mortgage. Have you ever heard of anything like that? Yeah,
there are some rules and restrictions around self-managed super funds putting money into property, but generally, as long as, you know, it's not somebody that's, you know, your own house or your family, that is something that you can definitely do. So self-managed super funds can invest in property. So absolutely. And we've actually got examples of that. As I said right at the beginning, Narara Ecovillage has been funded by members, and some of those members have actually drawn on their self-managed super fund money and invested that with Narara Ecovillage.
Yeah. So I guess it's all about putting it out there and connecting with people, and then letting the village mind work in a way.
That's right.
That sounds a bit esoteric, doesn't it? But really, there's probably what, 150 of us, 140 of us here, from all different walks of life, and some very business savvy people. Here you go. How do you spell BrickX?
I believe it's simply brick with an X at the end.
Oh, like brick, like a building brick.
Yes.
An right. X like a
X number of bricks.
Oh, good. I like that. All right, a couple of questions coming in from the Zoom chat here. We've talked a little bit about banks and their views about the Ecovillage. Do we have people who've been able to get loans here?
Yeah, absolutely. And even though I'm, you know, touting the benefits of avoiding banks, I'm one of them. So, you know, absolutely, banks do and have lent to people who own houses or land within the Ecovillage. Yes.
And do you think that they would be put off if I said that I wanted to have a tenancy in common with 3 of my friends?
Yeah, as soon as you join multiple people together, they will then have the additional risk assessments for each of them, and then the risk assessment of, well, what if one of them drops out, and you know, so it's not, as I said, it has happened before. Banks do loan on these alternatives, but it does add a layer of questioning and paperwork and, you know, consideration at the bank level. So yeah, I guess it's just not, you can't bank on it. Excuse my pun.
That was terrible. That was so bad. So I do feel like my gut feel just from what you're saying is that it is easier to explore the internal options, and then if nobody's got any money that they are able to help with, then looking outside.
I think so, and it's an interesting thing in the current market, I suppose, or current environment, where people are looking to move away from banks because they don't feel necessarily secure with leaving their money with a bank, but also not wanting the reliance on bank finance, because what if something did go wrong in terms of their own job security, I guess on the flip side, when you're earning interest of, at best 1.8%, the opportunities to say, well, actually, I could invest that for somebody at a different rate and actually get a little bit more money. And yes, it might be a private arrangement that is a little bit unusual to me, but it's makes more sense, and it's a social, ethical investment as well.
And Deb, what would you say to people who are feeling like they're actually not quite ready to fork out the money to become a member of the Ecovillage? Because I do feel like there are an awful lot of people who are interested in what we're doing here at the Ecovillage, but there's a very different kind of level of connection with them compared with members that come to our member events and are here on site and working in our working bees and stuff. What would you say to people who are feeling uncertain about whether they should invest, given they might not have enough money to buy?
That's a good question as well, and we are hoping that we will have an alternative membership structure in the near future, so that people can make the step a little bit, almost like the baby step before the big leap, and so they can be brought into the family, if you like, before they say, yep, okay, I'm ready now, I've got my 30,000 or the 50,000 to hand over to purchase the membership shares. That's not available right now, but the other option is obviously to stay connected with us, and there's multiple ways of doing that. It's a little bit easier if you are local. There's all sorts of events going on, working bees that we do open up to people outside of the cooperative. And the other exciting thing is that we've set up some groups. I think there's certainly one, and I think we've got a few of them as well, from the Victoria. I think they've named themselves Narviks, perhaps. And there's also a potential group that we might set up for those in Sydney. Obviously, COVID issues create yet another layer of complexity with all of this. And a final option that isn't explored that frequently, but it is that you can actually join forces with somebody else that you maybe already know, or that you've met and have been conversing with as you've got to know the Ecovillage, and you can join with them. So, you could then actually both invest $15,000 and become members together.
And on our last open day, I was leading a tour, and there were two families there that actually basically drew up their car sharing guidelines during the tour because they decided that was something that was really important to them. All right, Deb, I've got to read the questions and I've got to concentrate.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so have we ever considered Bitcoin or cryptocurrency to purchase part of a community title?
Oh my God, that's for John, isn't it?
We do have members who are interested in this sort of thing. I've heard people talk about cryptocurrency. Are you able to respond to whether that's something that is going to be available?
Way over my pay grade, I'm afraid. I'm going to have to phone a friend.
This would make an interesting Friday night Zoom, though.
Oh my God, maybe the one in fortnight's time.
With there's one of our members who's very interested in this.
Absolutely, I think we should set it up.
Writing this down now. Cryptocurrency. Stay tuned in a fortnight's time. For those of you that aren't sure what cryptocurrency is, that gives us time to Google it. Oh, this is good. Maggie's saying she's happy to do a Zoom presentation on this. Oh, that's perfect. Fantastic.
Woohoo.
Maggie, keep an eye on our website and see the details for in a fortnight's time. We'll do a Zoom on it. People discussing how to spell brick X. Is it bricklet? Bricklet? No, it's not bricklet. Everyone's saying thank you. Yeah, Ruth, good point. Cryptocurrency is getting some thumbs up.
Cool.
You're also getting 5-star reviews on Facebook. No one said anything about me or my hair, but that's all right. Let's see. What else? We had heaps we were going to chat about, Deb, but we covered the main stuff.
I think we have. all my little
we've talked
scribble
about,
notes.
We've
I
talked
think we have
about how
actually.
you can protect yourself legally and financially if you do want to pursue a alternative, arrangement. And we've talked about how you might choose to build a small footprint or put extra residences on your lot if you still want to maintain yourself as an individual household. And we've talked about how you might consider co-housing if you're at that end of the sharing spectrum. And what else have we talked
There's
about?
one other thing that I don't think we have touched on. We do have a few lots within the eco-village of the land that we're about to sell in stage 2 that are larger. So we're talking maybe the 700 up to 1,000 square meters, I think, something like that. And so they could actually cater for something different, something larger. And so, and this might actually go back to Labosh's question actually as well. So we would love to do something that, I can't remember what it's got to call, manor house, I think is the type of housing. And when I think of it, I imagine a part of Sydney where I had quite a few school friends, and there were McMansions everywhere. And these were serious McMansions. One of them had like 6 garages. And that's just a standard residence. So if that's possible in R2, then the McMansion is completely possible up here, but not in the same way that it was being used where it was. It could be used to accommodate easily a few different families, easily. And so when we look at these larger lots and what could be possibly done on them, we could get quite creative even within the rules that we've got. But hopefully we'll even get some leniency on those rules with the planning proposal being accepted, and so that we can do alternative housing on a larger scale. And when I say large scale, I don't want to freak people out. That might mean perhaps up to 8 dwellings on a large lot, but I wouldn't expect any higher than that. It might be less. So it's not like, boom, we'll have like a skyrise.
I was just kind of thinking boom, just with 8, but that's because I'm still learning more about alternative ways of living. All right, question from one of our Zoom people asking about the 50,000. Do you need to pay the 50,000 to get the membership shares before you even look at investing in your lot?
Yes, so the process is that you can't actually purchase a lot unless you're a member of the cooperative, and that means you have purchased shares at in the cooperative. The minimum share ownership is 30,000.
Dollars or
30,000 shares, and they're each $1, so $30,000.
Good.
And so you can become a member with 30,000. As I said, you can also become a member with somebody else. So joint membership, 15,000 each, or even 3 parties split it 3 ways.
8 membership?
I don't think we've quite gone there, but we are exploring how that's going to work. There will be a solution on that one before we have the manor house built. So that is required. So yes, before you can purchase the lot, you do need to become a member. And we're looking at doing our process, which is called dots on lots, where everybody gets some little sticky dots and they put them on a big map saying that's the lot that I would like. That's our dots on lots process. That is essentially how we sell the lots. We're going to do that process probably say December through to March. So December this year through to March next year. So it's coming pretty soon. So there's a relatively small window of time where, essentially the membership will fill up, and there's going to end up being, I'm sorry, a lot of I'm sorries. We're kind of full now.
And it's funny, but we were at that point when we bought into stage 1.
Me too.
I think we were member number 84, and there was only 1 or 2 lots left. So we walked into the room that had the big map of all the stage 1 lots, and there was only 2 lots left, and both of them were a bit dodgy, and we had to sort of look at them and decide. And then eventually there was a bit of movement, and we did find the lot that was perfect for us. But that's so exciting that that's going to be happening for stage 2.
It's going to happen all again. It's like deja vu.
But
Groundhog Day.
But that's
it is.
quite
it's very
soon.
exciting. Yeah.
To be able to know where on that stage 2 land you're going to be building.
Yeah, absolutely. And we had one of our members who's has already become a member for stage 2, spent some time up on the land and already really putting a lot of thought and time into and energy into going, okay, where would we like to put our dot already, Yeah.
And so you mentioned the $30,000 to become a member of the cooperative, and that gives you the right to put your dot on a lot. Where does the 50,000 come from?
So the minimum shareholding is 30,000. If you put in the extra 20,000, so you have 50,000 shares, essentially that's just prepaying a deposit on the land. We can't call it a deposit until we have a contract and you know which lot you're buying. So it's not technically a deposit from the beginning, it's fully refundable shares. So any share purchase you make, just like any other shares, you can have them refunded if you change your mind. But the 20,000, the benefit of prepaying it is that you do get put onto what we call the priority list. So it gives you that capacity to say, I'd like that lot. And then you go into a conversation with people about, you know, I'd like this lot because of this, and you see who else wants that lot, and it all kind of shuffles around for a week or two, sometimes a month or two. And if it remains that there's 2 or 3 people who want the same lot, then it will come back down to priority. So there is a benefit, there is a financial benefit of putting in, if it's possible, that 20,000. And from an Ecovillage perspective, it really is about supporting the Ecovillage with the finance as well. So it's, you know, we're not basically trying to do a bit of a money grab, but we are, as I said, not funded by banks. And so we do need the financial support when people are able to give it.
Because it's that money that will be doing the civil work for stage 2, the roads and the piping and whatever.
Yeah, and even paying for the DA in advance. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. All right, just looking at the time, we've only got 1 minute left to go. Having a quick look, are there any parting words from you, Deb, to our very massive audience tonight about why they might want to more seriously consider either coming to the village for an open day or taking that next step to membership?
Look, I would say if any of this has resonated or excited you, then get in touch. We've got the multiple ways, and I'm sure that's part of your extra spiel. So I'll let you say that, but really, if it resonates, keep the conversation going with us, because that's the best way to work out whether or not this is what you want to do, and great things can happen.
Thank you, Deb. This has been a massive night. It's been very, very interesting. Yes, this conversation has been recorded. I've got a couple of people asking, and it will be on our website in a couple of days, probably. Again, as Deb said, if any of this has spoken to you, I would encourage you to pursue the membership, particularly some of the, I've got some people here that, you know, have been following us for a little while now. And basically, that until we get that next layer of membership, that's one way that you can connect in a more intimate way here. Failing that, if you're interested in the more in the co-housing stuff, there's Co-Housing Australia and the various associated chapters that might be able to provide some support as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's some people online tonight who, yeah, very much connected in with those groups.
And there are a few Facebook groups as well, including there's a Facebook group based around David Holmgren's book, Retro Suburbia, and there's lots of discussion there about alternative property ownership and living arrangements. Now, in terms of actually coming to the Ecovillage, we are still having some events, even in COVID times. So we have our open day coming up on the 29th of August, which is next weekend, I think, Saturday from 1 o'clock. And it's all pre-booked tours because we have to limit numbers and provide contacts and whatever. But that's really a great way to come to the land, sort of rub shoulders at a 1.5 metre distance with people and meet some members and really see if the land speaks to you. I mean, that sounds esoteric as well, but you know, you really do find out pretty quickly whether you think this is a place you could be comfortable or not. We also have got a special tour on the day it's called the Ecovillage Explorer, and it's a tour for kids and families, and that's quite good as well. Coming up in September, we've got an open day on Sustainable House Day, so we'll have some online content on the Sustainable House Day website, but we'll also have an event here. Our next Zoom in 2 weeks' time, Friday night, looks like it's going to be on cryptocurrency. So if there's a Cryptocurrency for Dummies website, I'll brush up. Otherwise, the fellow I'm thinking of will be very informative and very creative. You thought Deb was a creative person? You should listen to this fellow.
I think he'd be very excited to hear.
If you can't make the open day or you go and it's all booked out, you can look. Do we still do private tours?
Absolutely.
I think we are. And that's kind of a more intimate way, I think, of seeing the site. The guide,
more bespoke as well. It works really well for people who've, you know, even with families, or really have an idea of what they would like to see.
And then we are in the process of launching our Young Explorers program here at the Ecovillage as well, which is going to include TOTS tours, kind of mums and bubs weekday tours, where you can come and see some of our animals and explore our play areas. And we're also kicking off with some public events during the school holidays. Oh, wow, look at that. Very, very interesting. Thank you, Tanya. Lots of great comments here on the Zoom. Oh, we've run out of time. I'm getting the siren from my husband. Let's continue this conversation on either the Facebook page, or if you want more information, through the Contact Us tab on the website.
That's right.
Otherwise, I will hopefully see some of you at an open day. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Good night.